Welcome back, everyone, to the Automotive Market Minute, in which may or may not take just over a minute. My name is Steven Georgella.
My name is Philip Trepetowski.
And I'm James Sivko.
Welcome to the first episode in 2025. It's a new year. It might be a new you. It absolutely is not a new me. I'm just the same as I was before. Here is what we are going over during this action-packed episode of the Automotive Market Minute. We're going to talk about our aggregate dealership performance, sales, inventory, incentives, consumer sentiment taking a little bit of a shift, and of course, seasonal, annual, adjusted rates. And what's happening? How much is the factory really trying to fight to get new car sales across the country? And then there's two manufacturers that are in major trouble. And what matters is if this boat takes a long time to turn around, what the hell are the executives doing to try to turn this thing around? But before we move forward, if you could please remove your hats and a moment of silence for these fallen models. Go ahead, Phil. Wow. A lot of good times, but as they say, all good things come to an end. With that said, let's go over our aggregate dealership performance. We talked about a December to remember, and sure enough, the factories really came swinging when it came down to the incentives. But look at new sales. Nothing was really that crazy. Now, we saw markets like Houston, incredible. We saw markets like Dallas, big time sales. We saw a lot of micro markets. We saw dealers that were down December versus November, things that really overall we just normally don't see during the month of December. But something that I'll mention a couple of times during this market minute, we're hearing people, some of them just pent up saying, I'm not going to buy a vehicle till Trump's in office. Now, whether that's rational or not, that's neither here nor there. But we're hearing people that are literally like, I'm not ready yet. I want to see where things are going to be at in January and going into February. So you can see the statistics here, a lot that was flat. The first thing that I noticed is that used sales were actually down. We talked in the market minute, if you've been watching the previous months, which of course you have been. Of course, this isn't the first market minute you've ever seen. You're an avid viewer, an avid watcher. You would know that used sales have been very strong over the previous months, and new sales have kind of been trickling, if you will. This was the first time that we saw that little bit of drop. And could it be that the factories increased and got more aggressive with incentives? That definitely would make a lot of sense. But of course, I'll let the brainiacs unpack that. With that said, it is your favorite time of the show. It's where I shut up and I let the brainiacs take over.
Now, this is showing strictly Fountain Ford dealership performance. If we look at sales from a national level, a little bit of an interesting trend here to end the year. Actually, for every week in the last 4 weeks of the year, we saw new sales increase. And if you go back to mid-October, nearly every single week kind of gradually increased throughout the end of the year. Ultimately, new retail sales ended up about 5% year over year compared to 2023. Now, if we look at the used retail sales, you can see that they were relatively flat. What I want you to kind of pay attention to here, I saw something that was kind of interesting in this data. If you look at 2019 through 2023, you historically see used sales actually kind of gradually fall throughout Q4 towards this part of the year. We didn't see that in 2024. Used retail sales stayed flat in a time where they do normally decline. Ultimately, used retail sales ended the year up about 4% year over year for the year as a whole. Now, if we look at the inventory situation, new inventory declined in December down to 3.1 million units. That is still up 22% against 2023. It's still down 5% compared to 2019, but days supply, as we compare against 2023, ended the year 12% above last year. If we look at used days supply, pretty much throughout the entire year, it was below 2023 levels. In December, it fell to 2.2 million units, down 6% against 2023. And days supply actually ended at 48 days, which is 1 day higher than the end of last year. So fairly comparable on the used side. Now, what have the manufacturers been doing to try to move this inventory? Well, as we talked about in our December market minute, we saw that 0% APR financing deals reached a 12-month high as it relates to actually last December. Well, we've seen those actually continue so far in January. They remain strong. if we look at less than 3% APRs, those increased in November, they increased again in December, and again, they're holding pretty steady in January. So we've seen manufacturers get much more aggressive to end out 2024, and they're staying aggressive at least what looks like to be through the spring of 2025.
Real quick, one of the more interesting starts to the year that we've seen, you have Christmas be in the middle of the week, and then all of a sudden you had New Year's be in the middle of the week. The new year started January 6th. That's really when people started to do anything whatsoever. And so we definitely saw dealers that were sitting there and be like, hey, I started off January really slow. It's like, no shit. Everybody said, okay, well, New Year's week, I'm taking the whole week off. And so we saw a lot of autoresponders coming back to us. Hey, I'll be back on the 6th or the 7th. So do not be surprised, especially when we see the 10th update, which will come out on Monday, Phil. I'm not going to be surprised if traffic overall, lead volume, et cetera, is just down.
This reach for zero yields and low yields comes in the face of now a 100 basis point recent increase in 3, 5, and 7-year paper. So it's more expensive for manufacturers and their finance captives to do this. So every single consumer that gets one of these loans is a lucky consumer indeed.
And on the advertising side, we've seen a big want. 0% offers have been performing fantastic while rates have been so high. Interesting tidbit here. Out of all new finance deals, only 2.4% of all deals are a 0% purchase. 2.4%, that's all of them.
I mean, 0%'s the American way. What's going on here, people?
Hey, don't forget, if it's free, it's for me.
As recently as the fourth quarter, the interest rate markets were pricing in 6 rate cuts from the Fed. All it took was a little bit of strong economic data to maybe rule out a recession for at least through the first half of 2025. I wouldn't be surprised if we pull up rate markets now and see a projection of 0 rate cuts for the rest of the year. So we're not going to get relief from lower interest rates. We're just going to have to wait for the consumer flywheel to catch, for consumers to get used to borrowing at higher rates.
And what I'm so interested in is, like, you feel at this point like they feel like they made a mistake, whether they would say it out loud or not.
It's very easy to poke fun at the Fed and to second guess their decisions. It's one of the easiest things to do is to Monday morning quarterback the Fed. Yes, I think that these rate cuts were either the markets or the political landscape ordering the Fed to cut rates, and they may have been premature, and certainly the rest of the interest rate market, the 3, 5, 7-year sector, even the 10s and 30s have shot up by an amount and a degree that we really haven't seen before in the 100 days from the start of the Fed cutting cycle. The cutting cycle might already be over. We may just figure that out over the weeks and months to come.
Obviously, if they put us at the helm, I'm just going to pretend I'm the head of the Fed. I don't think I would have cut a single time.
We are going to see a reacceleration of used car prices in 2025. We've covered it on the Market Minute. We've talked about a lack of 3-year lease roll-offs. So some of the highest quality used cars are not going to be available. It's going to create a mad scramble for mid-grade and low-grade used cars. That's a big part of the CPI. And that has been a big reason why the CPI has fallen throughout 2024. So we'll see some inflationary headwinds in 2025. The cuts probably were ill-advised. They probably shouldn't have cut at all. A 5-year short rate is not unreasonable. And so now we've got 4% short rates, and we'll all trade and merchandise accordingly. But rates are not going back to 0 anytime soon. We should all internalize that. We can't and we aren't going back to some of those rates that we've seen in the last decade. This is an interesting slide. We've cut out Stellantis. Stellantis inventory is about 40% of the light vehicle inventory in the US. And we've cut out GM here just for clarity. And you can see that Ford has got some nameplates that are at the high end of days inventory. That's our scale here. The more red, the more days you have. But overall, this is a pretty sanguine chart for the industry. Inventory levels are fine. We just have 2 manufacturers that we're going to discuss later in the Market Minute that are in some trouble. And if the Trump tariffs come through, which we're also going to dissect later, Ford's going to be the primary beneficiary of that. So in terms of inventories here, I don't think we've got any big problems to speak about other than the obvious ones at Stellantis.
James,
Yeah, this is a great chart. We show it to you often here on the Market Minute, and that is the tight pattern between consumer sentiment, which is the orange line, and total vehicle sales in the US, which is the black line. This is a really long-term chart. It's 40 years of data. It just helps show you where we are in the cycle, the effects of some of these events like COVID, or we can go all the way back to employee pricing events or cash for clunkers on this thing. But it represents a lifetime in the car business, and we're in a pretty good place in the cycle. Recent data has really surprised us here at Fountain Forward. We've had great consumer sentiment data. That rhymes with seasonally adjusted unit sales as well, which is the black line here. We've had really great numbers. And as a matter of fact, if we get rid of our two manufacturers that are in trouble, let's start adjusting for those and let's take a look at those on a longer term basis. Stellantis is down about 40% from its peak about 8 years ago. And it doesn't seem to be a ship that's being turned around. And this is large enough. This hole in the middle of Stellantis' sales is large enough to affect national sales. I mean, this is 1 million units a year that we're talking about that have disappeared. And if we also look at our second manufacturer in trouble, that's Nissan, which is also down 60% even. That's also 900,000 cars a year missing from sales. And if we take those two manufacturers out, we have got the everything else bucket. So that's the black bar at the bottom here. And you can see that adjusted for these two manufacturers that are having some trouble, the rest of the industry is fine. It's put in an excellent 2024. And if you look at the estimates from everybody from Automotive News to S&P to Motor Intelligence, and you look at all of their estimates for 2025 sales and about 2.5% sales growth, this is an industry that is going to book another year of top cycle volumes, and consumers are interested in getting new cars, turning them over. Whatever they had to not buy in COVID is also still showing up in this bucket to a degree. 2025 should be a decent year in the auto industry. We just won't notice it because a large hunk of the auto industry, representing a lot of nameplates, remains underwater.
Donald Trump is inaugurated on January 20th. There's been all of this talk about tariffs. How are those going to impact the auto market?
American University in Washington, D.C. has an excellent index of the Americanness of each make and model of car. I would recommend that every GM on this call, every head of sales on this call, take a look at that index and take a look at where your nameplates fall, because the tariffs are going to hit the vehicles that we deal in every day very unequally. Over on the left is Ford and General Motors. Even those aren't 100% American made. Often cars are just, the parts and cars are imported straight to Mexico, straight to Canada, and then assembled there, and then through NAFTA to avoid tariffs altogether, sneak across the border and be sold. So no car is 100% American when it comes to the combustion engines that we all deal with. They start off at around 80% and they fall. But over on the left are Ford and GM and some other, even Toyota and Honda have got lots of plants here in the US. So they rate high on the Americanness scale. They are going to, on a net basis, be helped by these tariffs. And again, Stellantis is mispositioned here. Companies like Volvo and Polestar and Mazda are mispositioned here, and they're going to probably see higher MSRPs. And so this is a way of the market kind of self-correcting here. The tariff situation is something that we're going to be monitoring throughout 2025, and it's going to cause changes in sales, inventories, and MSRPs.
Fantastic explanation, James. And how about a little bonus slide for our viewers?
This is a great slide. Hey, I'm sorry that we're bringing you a 50-year-old story, and that is that, stick shifts, standard transmissions have been less and less of the drivetrains sold in the US since probably the 1970s. That's not what we're trying to do here. We are trying to help you merchandise your lot. And what we found is that even since 2010, the number of stick shifts sold in the US has fallen another 70%. This is across cars and pickup trucks as well. The standard transmission was a part of the pickup truck purchases.
For the users out there, for the viewers out there, I want you guys to play a little game here. What percentage of all vehicles sold in the United States do you believe are sold with a manual transmission? I want you to think about it. I want you to maybe type it in the comments, okay? Now, I realize you're going to go ahead and get this answer right after this. I get it. But let's play a little game. Why don't you go ahead and just type that in there real quick. Don't be bashful now. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, excuse me, Mr. Sivko, would you go ahead and educate the viewer as to what percentage of all sales are manual?
The answer is less than 1%. 0.9% are now stick shifts. If you have a romance with the stick shift, like many of us do, and you think you can push 20 of them a year through your dealer, the answer is you're going to get stuck with a couple because it's down another 70% since 2010. This is an unrelenting trend. And unless you're selling something special like the Mazda Miata or Porsches, you're just not going to move stick shifts. And the answer is don't even try. There are a million places. I don't care if it's a manual transmission or a car color where none of us can afford to take risks when it comes to merchandising. You don't want to be stuck with something that nobody wants.
The quote was, if you have a romance with the stick shift, like I believe that most of us do, that's just something that's definitely going to want to be written down for history. James, thank you so much for enlightening us. It's important for us to really think back on that. So a couple things to close out here. First of all, we've had a lot of conversations with people about this whole Trump holdback thing. It's like, what do you mean, Stephen? What do you mean Trump holdback? We've heard multiple people come out and go, I'm not politically motivated with this statement. I'm merely making this statement based on what I've heard. We've literally heard people say, I'm not purchasing a vehicle until after January 20th because I don't want Biden to get credit for my purchase. And it seems as if that's not something that's just like a couple people. It seems as if there's like a lot of people. But one thing I'd like to say is, I've mentioned this many times. I don't know nearly as much as you two when it comes down to the specifics of what we go through on this call, specifically pertaining to the more macro market information and data you guys put out there. But I do try to observe what's going on and then give my general feedback or say what I would do if I was. And it's like, guys, when Trump comes in, he's got 2 years of digging. I think it's going to take 2 years. And I think this whole like Trump's going to save the day thing. Here's my response. The truth shall set you free, but first it's going to piss you off. And I think that the revealing of the truth over the short term is going to be brutal for people. And I think a lot of people that are angry and just want to go and kind of beat their chest, I think a lot of people over the first 12 to 24 months are going to come after his administration. And maybe you could say rightfully so if you're just going to look at what happens after he comes into office. But like, with all due respect, isn't he like he has to dig out of this hole? Am I wrong, James?
I'm looking forward to finding out if Oswald acted alone or not.
Do we think it's going to be released?
Maybe.
You know what? If he does 50% of what he said he's going to do, it's going to be a really, really wonderful next 4 years. And so, man, what an honor that God brought us to 2025. What an honor that I get to sit here and share the stage with you two gentlemen. I genuinely mean it. It's a real honor and a pleasure. On behalf of my colleagues, James Sivko and Phil Trebetowski, I'm Steven Gergella, and God willing, we'll see you next month on the Automotive Market Minute. See ya.